Welcome back to an episode of Ken Reads. Although today, instead of reading a letter, Megan and I are coming here to talk about ambiguity in relationships with friends and lovers, and how when we're connected with someone who can at times behave like a romantic partner, yet deny that they are romantically involved with us, how that can feel for us on the receiving end of it, how it can make us feel crazy, and also how this links to in the LGBTQIA plus community, as well as also to attachment issues that we normally talk about. And I'll make this very clear for everyone in a minute what I'm referring to, because I admit what I've described may sound a bit vague at the moment, but really what we're talking about is a term that I've coined called ambiguationships, where if we're with someone, doesn't matter if they're a friend or a lover, there's so much ambiguity as to what we actually are, and it's having a direct impact on how we feel about ourselves. So before we jump into that, Megan, would you like to reintroduce yourself for everyone?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. My name is Megan Brito. I am a coach with Ken Reed Counseling, so I'm a team member with Ken. I support individuals who have recently experienced a breakup with somebody that had some pretty severe attachment woundings. I help folks to work on healing their own insecure attachments. I also help to put context to partners, like the ex-partners that people were with, that this individual struggled with things like addiction. And I also help to explain what perhaps could be abuse or abusive dynamics in a relationship that somebody had with somebody that has again, pretty significant attachment woundings. So I work part-time with Ken as a coach, and I work full-time as a social worker. I'm a registered social worker with the Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Service Workers, and I provide addiction counseling in my community in rural southwestern Ontario. There, I specialize in behavior addictions. So I see a lot of folks for things like gambling addiction, sex and pornography addictions, binge eating, tech use, video game addictions. And for many, many years, I worked part-time or full-time, excuse me. I worked full-time in the field of domestic violence for many years. So I also recognize how, again, elements of abuse and addiction can affect those with really significant attachment woundings. So that's where I bring that knowledge into the space with coaching that I do with Ken. So yeah, that's me. That's what I have to offer.
So today, to give an example of what we're talking about, we're going to be talking about, for instance, a relationship where, let's just say you're interacting with someone who starts out as a friend. And as you get to know this person and you spend more time with them, this friend starts to behave in ways that feels somewhat romantic. For instance, instead of just doing the normal things of catching up with this person every now and then, you're texting each other every day, having these long conversations where you feel like you're checking in with one another, you're staying up late to the wee hours of the morning, communicating. You're having these very intense catch ups. They're not dates, they're catch ups. You're also maybe going on holidays together where it feels like things are actually kind of a little bit intimate with one another. You may not be doing anything physically romantic. That might be like the one thing that's separating this from being a complete romantic relationship, but there is definitely some undertones of romance in your conversation. You often find that things have a certain chemistry between the two of you that neither of you are willing to call out and be like, this feels kind of like romantic chemistry. In fact, it often feels like you're just waiting for them to admit, hey, this feels like more than friendship. And you dare not do that out of fear that if you do, then this friendship will be over. You might also find that you're staying over with them or they're staying over with you at your place quite a lot. And they might even be using a lot of your facilities, like your bathroom, quite a bit instead of using their own home's facilities. It really feels like this is best friendship on steroids. And if we add in the LGBT element to this, this person you're seeing may say they're straight, have had a history of straight relationships, but in this context, even if you are, for instance, a lesbian and this girl is seemingly straight, you know, it feels like there is actually some romantic undertones that are going on between the both of you, in spite of what seemingly is an incompatible relationship. So, what's going on here? How do we navigate this? And then when we add even like the attachment issues too, this person who's seemingly straight also has some pretty severe avoidant attachment issues as well too, where they're just flat out refusing to acknowledge the elephant in the room. Although in this case, it's more than one elephant. There's an entire zoo here of the damn things. So that's the picture that we're playing with. And I wanted to talk about this for ages because no matter whether or not you're straight or part of the LGBTQI plus community, ambiguationships happen all the goddamn time and can be so confronting and challenging because they defy even the framework of a situationship. They can be very embarrassing and very shame provoking for a lot of people because a lot of us think, how can we fall for someone who's seemingly not into us and is just a friend? Are they friend zoning us? What's going on here? I feel ashamed that I have these romantic feelings for a friend. It doesn't seem like they're reciprocating, even though they're behaving in ways that feel romantic. How can they not see it? Etc. I've had a few of these in my time to know what it feels like going through this, and it's nothing short of painful and not fun. But I'm going to take a breath. Megan, what are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you spoke to that really, really well. And I love how you highlighted that it's not just one elephant in the room, it is a whole zoo. The herd of elephants is present in these types of dynamics. That really is what's going on. And I can appreciate folks listening maybe have not experienced this, or maybe folks that are not part of the LGBTQ community have not experienced this, but maybe you've had ambiguous situationships with other people in your life. But I think you really highlighted it well, and I think it's out there more than we realize. So yeah, I agree. I agree it's out there. I know I've experienced these types of dynamics where I wasn't sure if somebody was into me or not. And then it hasn't been too many, but most of them, I think, except for one or two, did later on end up coming out of the closet. So that's been very interesting. But it really is a mind fuck. It's a weird feeling to be in. And you being on the receiving end of it, I think whether or not you're part of the LGBTQ community, there's a lot of shame and there's a lot of weird feelings that come with it. And even then trying to go and initiate friendships or getting close to other people in the future, whether or not there's romantic intentions behind it, just feels uncomfortable. And then that can be a struggle.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah, yes to everything you said, and also it's one of those things where you're probably not going to find a lot of traditional support to help you with these kind of cases as well too, because if you talk about it, people will just think you're seeing what you want to see in this experience. You only like hitting on people who aren't that into you. You're someone
Mhm.
who's clearly obsessed with someone who's just not that into you. You need to find yourself someone who actually does want to be with you. And I mean, while some of that may have a percentage of truth to it, it's invalidating. And it can feel really, difficult to navigate because, it's so painful to feel like you're both essentially lovers in waiting for something to happen just for one of you to just to admit, yes, I have feelings, or yes, this is a thing, or yes, in fact, I am part of the LGBTQI plus community. But alas, in my experience, that doesn't happen when you're still engaged in these dynamics.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't. And something I think about too is if they have behaved like this with you, they behave like that with other people too.
Yeah.
Until if they ever do either come out or call out that elephant that they have, um, oh, it's painful. And I like how you also highlighted that there's not a lot of support out there. And I think when you're at the receiving end and this relationship breaks down, or you're waiting in hopeful limbo land for someone, for usually them, usually it's the other person, you're hoping for them to say something. Again, this is just from experience, that you're too afraid or you're too worried to say something. Again, obviously, I cannot speak for anybody else who's been through these types of experiences, but I know I've had, again, I can probably count on one hand. I think I've had maybe five in my entire life where I've had these types of ambiguous situationships, where you're so afraid to say something because if they say no, or they're like, I'm not gay or I'm not bisexual, and this fear of, did they think I was hitting on them because I'm gay? And that's, I know for me, why why I've never wanted to say anything. So then you're in this ambiguous space, and there's fear and there's hope and there's worry about loss and excitement for the future and worry about the future. Um, and eventually when these relationships do break down or this person does leave, we are felt like it's our fault. And it's a type of ambiguous loss. It's a type of grief. And because this person didn't die, and again, maybe it didn't really look like a relationship up front that had romantic feelings behind it, people don't understand why that loss is so significant because that person didn't die. Because they're still alive, they go, just get over it, move on. You can find another friend. Or exactly, they just weren't that into you. Quit being weird about it and move on. And it's not how that works. So it really is a real loss, and it really is real grief behind it. And because of the ambiguity behind it, it makes it, as you said, that much more difficult to find resources or to find people that will just validate you and believe you. Even some professionals don't grasp that, or they try to dismiss it or minimize it, and it just doesn't make it any better.
It doesn't. And yes, I love everything you said because it's one of those things where people might even chalk it up to like, oh, you've got a crush, you're limerent, you're fantasizing over this, you're just seeing what you
Yes.
see. And it's like, well, no, because, and this is something I had to learn for myself too. And it's one thing where it really comes down to trusting your intuition is this is the hard part. On the surface, yes, this person says in this context, they might be straight, they might just be a friend, they might be this, like they, whatever it is they're saying, right? On the surface, it seems like this is just going nowhere. Now, what's not so clear that can be felt is the fact that there is a connection between you and this other person. And I think the thing is that what's different from, say, simply a crush on another person, where that would be characterized by maybe a one-sided, unrequited fondness for someone who you barely spend any significant time with, is different in this context because we can look at this and we can look at the other side of the evidence and go, this person is behaving in ways where it really seems like they want a romantic relationship with you. This person is turning to you for a lot of emotional stuff. And on one hand, we might say, oh, well, that person was just you. They do this with everyone. What if they're not? And also, if they are doing this with everyone else, well, that's still problematic because it's also causing you to be on the receiving end to feel like this is something more significant than it actually is. And they need to be called out on it because you can't simply behave in that way with people because it can feel emotionally manipulative. And then
Mm-hmm.
even if we put that to one side, often, the question then asks, well, okay, well, why do these people, choose to do this? Like, if they know all of this is to be true, like if they know that we're just friends, why would they still continue to engage? Like we're more than that. Why would they have these very intense reactions to, our interactions together? Why is it they might run away when we get close? Why is it that they have, these emotional mood swings when we're together? Why is it that they become very defensive when we're getting closer? Oh, could it possibly be that maybe there is actually something going on beneath the surface and it's actually very shameful and very scary for that person because if they were to acknowledge that this is what's going on, it would be psychologically devastating for them to acknowledge that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And where are they hanging out at that point? In the closet. They are, and they're not like hanging out just behind the door that they just need to reach and open the handle for the most of the time. They're so deep. They're so deep in the closet. and like hiding behind all the clothes, stuffed animals and blankets and whatever else is in there. And that's the shame, the deepness of being in the closet and the shame it brings can then elicit this type of behavior where again it's ambiguous, it's kind of a situationship. You know that there's something more going on. Even though again, on the surface this looks like a friendship, I do see that there is this similarity of um you know that there is this connection there and you feel it just like those types of connections and you know intuitively that that's there when we date somebody that has a severe, often avoidant attachment style, where we know that at one time they were plugged in, they were there, they wanted to be with us, and then their attachment woundings and their trauma got the best of them. And if they could, they would, not if they wanted to, they would. That's that similarity I see with individuals who play out these ambiguous situationships where a big part is, again, this is just my view of why it stays at that level is because they are still sitting with so much shame of coming out of the closet. So,
Yep. And they may not even want to recognize that that is something that's going on inside of them as well, too. Like, it's really funny. I find it really interesting, too, how some of these people may have, if we're looking at this under the LGBT lens, because this can be a thing in this case, it's always very curious as to being like, okay, for instance, why is it that this seemingly straight man seems to only hang around with other, gay and bisexual men? Or why is it that this guy who's seemingly very, hyper masculine in his appearance, and always seems to date these very like butch women, seems to also have these very tender parts of himself that he wants to hide away at all costs because they are in conflict with the way in which he wants to present himself too. And I understand some people might hear this and think, well, you're just seeing what you want to see. It's like, well, actually, no, I'm not, because I know for a fact that I've been working in this field for a while now, and I understand this stuff, my own stuff as well too. It is very interesting what we try and repress and disown in ourselves, and how it has a funny way of showing up at our doorstep when we're trying to repress our own stuff. And none of this is a coincidence. Like, I just think that, some individuals, have very interesting ways of trying to deny certain parts of who they are. And this doesn't just extend to sexuality. This could extend to even romantic relationships where, for instance, someone is, say, let's just use a straight example, like you're dating someone with a pretty, well, sorry, you're hanging out with someone who has a pretty severe avoidant attachment style. And this could be gay or straight, actually, or within the LGBTQ community. We know that they're of the orientation where that would be compatible, right? But they're burying their head in the sand and they don't want to see the writing on the wall. It's like hello, like we hang out all the time, we do all this stuff together, we're always constantly, finishing sentences which is all little stuff, but we're also very close and connected, and we're really supportive of one another. We're practically hanging out all the time. Like, how can you not see that this is more than just a friendship? But for these people, it is just so hard for them just to accept reality. And that's the thing that's so dangerous about these cases, is that when you're in an ambiguationship like this, as soon as you break the truth, as soon as you spell out what's going on, it ends, usually very quickly.
mm-hmm. Yep. The fear, and you said that so well, the fear and the shame that sets in is something that folks who, again, behave in this way, like it just sinks in and they're done. They're absolutely done. And I want to touch on also 2 points. So the first one, I've heard about this to my knowledge, whether professionally or in my personal life. I have not experienced knowing anybody that does do this, but I've heard that this is a thing. I think they call it bro time, where you will have, this is specifically for men, where men, you're kind of chuckling. I don't know if you've heard about this or not.
I'm already guessing where this is going, but keep going.
Yeah, and I bet you a lot of people who are probably watching or listening is guessing about this too. So yeah, I think it's called bro time, and they are straight They are manly men who will, to blow off steam, to de-stress, will give each other blowjobs, but they're not gay. Not at all. It's just what men do to blow off steam. And I remember hearing that and thinking to myself, I remember like sticking my finger in my ear and cleaning it out. Like, did I mishear that? Did I misunderstand something? Am I hearing this correctly? And no, I was. And again, I don't know if I called it the correct term. Um, and I could also appreciate maybe like I'm not here to demoralize men, but if you are sucking another man's dick, you're not straight. There's a little bit of something going on. So, but again, saying, no, no, this is just blowing off steam and this is what like cool guys, not cool guys, but like this is what like guys do. There's so much denial that's sinking in, and that's a defense mechanism. Even though it's obvious what's going on, you know, you're doing it, you're not denying what's going on. The denial of this being some type of same-sex attraction or even like a sex addiction, elements of one, that denial is there. So as far as I'm concerned, that's also a type of weird situationship. And that always just blew my mind as well. Um, and something to you know, and Ken, when you were talking about, you know, maybe women who are more masculine and more butch that are perhaps dating men, or men that are more feminine. There are definitely people that do that, and may women that may be more masculine, or men that may be more feminine, and they are straight. But the difference in these types of ambiguous situationships is the intense amount of closeness that's there that feels like it's more than just a friendship. So we're not here trying to stereotype or put people in boxes and saying, if you're a masculine woman, you're actually butch, or if you're a feminine man, you're actually gay. Not at all. Because there are people like that, and there's nothing, that's fine. But it's when there's this, again, this element of depth and closeness, when it's centering around the same sex and they're saying, no, I'm not, we're just friends. So I wanted to touch on that too. So, you know, nobody's freaking out over here. Like, yeah. But it's there, it exists. And yeah, the bromance one always, still I have moments where I'm like, this can't be real, but it is. So I don't know if you have any thoughts or comments about that, Ken.
I do, and I think what you shared, the thing that I want to comment on, which I think is really powerful with this conversation, is this idea of how, and this is something we see a lot with severely avoidantly attached people do in relationships, is the way they have to control and construct the narrative to protect themselves. It's
Yes.
me. It's This is the key thing I want to stress
Yes.
to people. I don't really, I'm not making a judgment call, a shame, or an indictment of people who are presenting more masculine or feminine, whether they're biologically male or female or trans. It's not about that. It's more about where the devil in the detail is in the context of these particular cases, as you were saying, where there's like an element of, even though on the surface this looks like this isn't going anywhere, it's just a friendship, there's clearly something else going on beneath the surface that's not 100% clear. And this is where I think it's particularly dangerous when you've got one partner, person, friend, in inverted commas, friend, is saying things like, I'm not straight, or I'm not gay, I'm not whatever it is, or like, and yet they're continuing to behave in ways which are strongly suggestive of the fact that they are, or when they're, say for example, if it's in the straight context, you're with a person, let's say Jack and Jill are going out as friends, and Jill is behaving in ways that are very flirty with Jack. They're seeing each other like all the damn time, but she keeps on stating, "We're such good friends," even though like they've been sleeping together, they've been, going out on dates together. She's continuing to reinforce, "We're just good friends." And when you're hearing that with such conviction from the other person, it's really fucking disarming and also discombobulating, because you're like, what? Like, what do you mean we're just friends? And then, you're going out together. People are commenting, being like, Jill and Jack, man, you guys, you're like the most amazing couple ever. You look so attractive together. You make me feel like I want a slice of what you have. And Jill quickly comes in a very mousy voice and is like, we're not together. We're not seeing each other. We're just good friends. And of course, this bewilders everyone because they're just like, are you sure about that? Because it looks like there's obviously a lot more going on here than what meets the eye. But, anyways, it's that whole thing of like when you've got someone who is so stubborn, so convinced that this is the way it has to be, and they don't want to acknowledge their own elephants in their room. The person on the receiving end, I've got to be brutally honest, is fucked because it will it will make you feel like you can't speak up for your truth because the minute you speak up, this is over. And trust me, it will be. There is no positive outcome in these dynamics at all. Unfortunately, it's one big lesson to learn, which is be very careful of being in these dynamics because you're not going to resolve this person's repressed stuff. And finally, it's just tragic because it's like you could like it's so easy to gaslight and validate yourself off the back of these experiences and just be beholden to that, that conviction they have when they're telling you, we're not this, I'm not that, even though their actions are completely contrary to what they're saying. You really have to challenge the narrative that's being spoken to you and come to your own conclusion of what's going on. And that can be a hard journey to get to.
Yes. Ken, I also love that you commented on that. And for folks listening or watching that have been following Ken Reed for quite a while, um, I think it was maybe this first or second live I did with you. I don't think this was a letter reading, but it was, no, it was a letter reading. And I talked about how trauma can really distort our intuition. It can, our inner compass, trauma will break it and we have to try to fix it. We have to learn how to listen to it again. And that I see more with folks that sit in avoidant land, that lean more avoidant, where anxiety will get the best of them and they'll say, oh, I'm feeling this way, it must be true. And that's anxiety talking and they're sabotaging. Or another, angle is they're saying, well, I don't feel anything, so this must be boring, this must be bad. So that's also what I mean by challenging, like that's a broken intuition. That's something that needs to be fixed extensively with a lot of therapy. A lot of therapy. And some coaching depending on the context, but that's a lot of deep inner diving. So when I talk about like our intuition, that's usually folks that are maybe more secure or lean a little bit more anxious because we're more in touch with our emotions. We're more in touch with how we feel, and that shapes our inner world. And we have a bit of a better understanding of our own intuition. That's a little more accurate. Still definitely has some things to be tweaked on and improved depending on where we're at in our own respective attachment woundings, but it tends to be a little bit more present. I feel like I'm going on a ramble. I'm sorry. What was the original what was the original question, Ken? I'm so sorry.
No, there was no question. It was really just talking about how I was saying you got to be really careful when you're interacting with someone who has the capacity to try and create a narrative that supports their own psychological denial.
Yes, that's what it was. I'm sorry. Thank you. So when they're denying, we were just, yeah, this, I don't like you like that. This is just a friendship, or I'm not gay, I'm not bisexual, I'm not pansexual. Like, no, I'm straight as a board. And they stick in those narratives and they don't leave don't leave that. Um, that will cause us to question things. But again, if we're more secure or again, leaning a bit more anxious, we tend to have a better judgment of, I don't really know about that. I don't really know how accurate that is. So something's not right deep down. I sense that even though they're denying it. But again, then we may get stuck in this place of maybe I am wrong. Maybe they don't like me. Oh my God, how bad is this? And then again, if you're part of the community, obviously not everybody, but this really is just speaking from my own experience, going, Oh my God. And more when I was not as comfortable with my own identity, but going, oh my God, they think that I'm just hitting on them just because I'm gay. Like the worst possible thing that could happen. And then, having this shame and embarrassment spiral of like, let me just crawl out of my skin and hide away and never come back. So it's like we can kind of listen to our intuition, but we also can feel very uncomfortable and very confused at the same time. I appreciate that may or may not make sense, but for us, it just causes our own wheels to spin and we don't know if we're coming or going. But usually we have an idea of what's going on if we're not as avoidant as the people we're involved with. So,
1 billion%. And I think, but the thing is that what you just said there, which is so brilliant, if we take that a step further, was what I noticed is it becomes a real battle of brain versus heart, where
mhm.
the heart is like, I can feel there's something going on between us, or that maybe if it's not heart, it's the intuition. Like there's an intuitive part that's just like, no, there's something going on here that feels like there's more to this than what I'm seeing in front of me. But the brain, if it's, experienced trauma, will often find ways to rationalize it and also to prove that it may not necessarily be true. And it speaks to that point too, which is, say, for example, if you're a gay man who's got a seemingly straight friend who you've been ultra friendly with, you're right. Like there can be there's that part of us that's like, I don't want to feel like I'm a stereotypical gay hitting on people. But even then, that's a whole subject for debate too, because I think a lot of that is projection that we receive from such a young age from very insecure people who just believe
Yes.
that, oh, all people who are LGBTQI plus are just hitting on straight people. It's like, no, that's a very pejorative stereotype that's been created by insecure people. But then we hold on to it being like, oh my God, I can't, I can't be that stereotype. But lest we forget, straight people also hit on LGBTQA plus people, in one way or another all the time, mistakenly, but unfortunately it doesn't come with that same stigma and shame that we often feel internally inside of ourselves because it makes us feel like we're somehow, we're that one gay man or lesbian woman who's, you know, just trying to make the impossible possible. We're just trying to be coerced. And look, some individuals are absolutely out there who are very predatory from our communities. We're not saying that doesn't exist. And there's certainly straight people who can be quite predatory to LGBTQI plus folk as well too. But the point in this context is simply to say that we can have protective parts of us that get very scared of being, judged and shamed in these cases. So instead of speaking up and being like, I'm feeling like I'm being hit on, or I feel like there's actually something more going on, we button it down and continue to act like friends, even though parts of us are screaming, this is not a friendship. This is something more romantic than a friendship. And we need to express that, otherwise, we're going to burst.
Yes. And I love how you hit on that and you talked about it and you said it very well too. Any narratives that we can have when we have this fear of, oh my God, I'm hitting on a straight person. They can be, I mean, there's so many. Some of them, I've heard, I like, if I'm doing this, people will think I have no standards, or people must think I'm a pervert, or people must think that I'm preying on them, right? So it's all of these things we internalize from, I think, from society and from other people that are deeply insecure, or again, depending on where we grew up. You were somebody that grew up in a heavily religious community or a small conservative community, or if there was cultural aspects or elements, or if even you had a family member or a parent who was closeted and they married to have kids, they weren't able to come out. We will take all that in, and that can, as you said, we have to button things down if we can become so afraid. And maybe these are some of the narratives or thoughts that we have. If we hit on the quote unquote seemingly straight avoidant person who's probably in the closet themselves, and it will just crush us. It will just eat us alive from the inside out. It's horrible. So again, Ken, I love how you also touched on, sometimes this is stuff within us that's really scary and we're afraid to call it the elephant in the room. But yeah, also, or if we do, that elephant is going to stomp us flat to a pancake. And that's the avoidant person saying, no, we're just friends and I don't like the color of your shirt anymore. So we're, we can't do this anymore. We were, I wasn't even friends with you. We weren't that close anyway. And then just leave your life and just totally banish you to the ether like you didn't even exist or matter to them.
I've
It's
seen.
such, yeah.
Sorry, keep going, Megan. Sorry to interrupt.
No, no, I was going to say that's it. That's all I got.
Because I was going to add to that too by saying, in my experience, what I have found is once you express that truth, often that's when, in my experience, there's been
Mm-hmm.
levels of passive aggressiveness and defensiveness from the other person because they don't like that the truth has been exposed. It's almost like if you were to buck the friendship label, that then starts to make the other person feel really shitty inside of themselves and feel really ashamed. And that's when things start to take a turn where they may become quite mean and also very passive aggressive towards you. Like I've seen cases where the avoidant person who was benefiting from the friendship suddenly becomes a jerk to the person that they were with and being really hot and cold. And if they're called out on it, they'll be like, no, everything's fine. I just thought you're too confusing or whatever it may be. Like they'll project it onto you and make it seem like you're the problem, when in fact
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones who are experiencing obviously all of this internal confusion. And they may also start telling you things like, well, I told you from the start that we were just friends, that we were nothing more than this. And whilst on one hand it's true, they might have said that to you, it's also part of their defensive rationalizing. They're not taking any accountability for their own involvement with
Mm-hmm.
with you. It's like, if you're dating someone, you're getting to know them, and you've been physically intimate, you've been romantic, you've been showing up all the time, and you end things abruptly, being like, "Well, I was never in a relationship with you in the first place." It's like, no, you don't get to pull that card. You have been in a relationship with me all this time. Don't fucking try and gaslight me into thinking that you weren't showing up when you clearly were. And this is why, again, I say it's so dangerous being with people like this because they can rob you of so many years of your life. And it's not to say that the feelings you have aren't valid, that you'd obviously look, some of these individuals, closeted or not, or, deeply ambiguous or not, I understand why people have, strong feelings for these people. But you've got to understand that when you are subjecting yourself to this person's distorted reality, you better play by their rules because the minute that you break free of that, that's it. And it's not a pretty experience. I know for me, once there was this time where I had to actually openly say, this is how I'm feeling, and I'm choosing to walk out of this because this is not good for my system. And I think that, it's one of those things where if it does happen quite a bit, you've got to question, okay, what is it in me that gets involved with these ambiguous cases? Like, what's going on here? And that's not a easy question to ask yourself, but you have to, because you have to ask yourself, okay, what is it that I might be invalidating inside of myself, and why is it that I keep playing to these people's playbook of what their reality is when it just clearly isn't a grounded reality?
Yes. And also, again, this is completely my view. I'm not speaking for anybody else. I wanted to also build on your point too that you just shared. And I think if again you get stuck in these ambiguous situationship dynamics, if you are part of the LGBTQIA plus community, are you yourself still struggling with a little bit of internalized homophobia too?
Yeah.
Yeah. And for folks, again, listening or watching that are kind of familiar with that term, or maybe not at all, when we talk about internalized homophobia, a lot of people can think that that means you see someone who's really bigoted, who is spewing hatred towards people that are part of the community. So that's what we think of that is a type of internalized homophobia. But even people that are part of the LGBTQ community, whether often when they're maybe not out, but they've known for a long time, and if their life is not at risk and they are still struggling to come out, um, or again, like still in the closet, or even if you are out, but if you kind of get to this ambiguous situationships, that means you're still holding on to some of these old narratives that bring you a lot of shame around your own identity, or how you are in some way letting other people down, or others are disgusted by you, or you are have elements of disgust or shame about yourself for being part of the community. I hope I kind of explained that well, and then if you wanted to add or build on it, but again, even if you are part of the community, if you're holding on to narratives that perhaps kept you in the closet, or if these are things you hear a lot about the LGBTQ community, you can end up with people in these dynamics. Or I've also worked with people where they are out, they are also dating another person that is out, but their partner is incredibly violent, is incredibly narcissistic, or is very image driven or image focused, um, really playing into particular stereotypes about regarding how they identify. And there can be a lot of internalized homophobia within that too. So yeah, I mean, if folks have like questions or want to obviously comment about that, please do so. But I also wanted to touch on that internalized homophobia, I think it can be an element if we are still gravitating towards these people, because we're also repressing that I can't be with somebody who's out. I have
Yes.
to be with somebody who's kind of in the closet, or I can't really have a proper loving relationship with somebody. So I'm going to gravitate towards this person.
Yes. I yes to everything you said, and I really resonate with that because that is very much what's happening as well too. And it's also that thing of like, well, it's safer to be with the ambiguous friend than it is to be
Mhm.
with someone who's fully out of the closet. And that can bring up a lot of pejorative stereotypes in your head where you're like, well, if I were to date someone who's gay, I would be judged and shamed for being with someone like that. It would say something about me. And it's wild because if you step back and think about it, it's like, how is it, that being with someone who's able to love you properly and also accept you is somehow more shame provoking than being with someone who can't do that, who's also deeply ambiguous and in the closet, and also likely has their own internalized homophobia as well too. But from a psychological level, makes total sense because it's all about what keeps you safe in that
Yes.
experience. And there are so many very sophisticated parts of us that will look at that and go, this is easy. This is what feels good. Like, this is actually easier to be with ambiguity than it is to be with someone who's more, you know, ready for a proper, in this context, gay relationship. And, internalized homophobia is one of those things. This is a conversation we could have for hours and hours and hours. But the way it shows up is not always obvious. It's not just the overt, you're a fag, you're a this, you're a that. That's absolutely part of it. But it can also be about how we protect ourselves by being very part of particular like groups within the community as well too, without feeling safe just to be ourselves. And another huge thing that makes this really difficult is, many of us often are not ready for what it is to be in a proper, healthy, loving relationship because if we get it, it can be so triggering to our system because if all we've ever known is needing to hide, to cover ourselves and to protect ourselves from shame and judgment, then being in a proper loving relationship is going to feel so activating to our system because we're not used to it.
Yes, exactly. And if we are in a same-sex relationship, just for example here, and this person we're with is loving and healthy and secure and has been working on their shit, because we all have shit, we all have baggage, we all have stuff that we can work on and deal with and sort through. And we're struggling with attachment woundings, we're struggling with internalized homophobia, whatever that looks like. And Ken, you said it in a live, and I just I could see it, it's burned in my brain. And I loved how you said it when you were talking about people that carry shame about their sexual orientation, basically saying, can't have this about me. So it's that. And so, I mean, again, that either can keep people still in the closet and internalized homophobia. And that is so like that is so much to work through for some people, even if they're in loving, healthy relationships, there can even be tiny smidgens that they just struggle to work through. So if we have internalized shame about who we are, that we didn't get to decide, because we don't get to decide if we're gay or not. Like that's not a decision we get to make. Um, or same thing if you're trans, you don't get to make that decision, right? We don't get to decide our sexual orientation. We don't get to decide if we have gender dysphoria. That's, there's so much with that. And so that, and then, oh, look, I'm with somebody loving and healthy. Like that is just, oh, it's a recipe for like nuclear bomb sabotage. It's awful. And again, the person at the receiving end, we become collateral damage. We become the collateral damage to their own trauma and dysfunction and shame. It's awful. It's awful. There's no other way of looking at it.
Yeah. So I think as we're just rounding out today, I'm sure people have probably experienced this in one form or another, even if it's not within the LGBTQI plus context. The ambiguationships are absolutely rife in life, and we see them play out in so many ways. But I really do believe it's a karmic lesson for a lot of us who go through it, in that you need to really, once this is all done and dusted, ask yourself some hard questions, which is, how did I get involved with someone like this, apart from the fact that they might have been good looking or interesting or engaging? What was it about this relationship that was safe? Why did I think that this was something that would be healthy for me as well too? Because that starts the process of starting to undo a lot of those sophisticated parts of us that want this experience. Like, I'll be honest, like, it's very easy, and I've seen this play out with a lot of clients too. When you, for example, if you've got like the fawn response as one of your dominant styles of self-protection, I often describe one of its parts as being the Stockholm syndrome effect. It's so easy if you have grown up in a abusive background to have this part of you that's convinced the way I will achieve acceptance is by being as performative, loving, doting to these emotionally unavailable people. I will literally, make a way for this person to love me so that way we can get along. And it's so maladaptive in adult contexts where you no longer need those parts of you to activate. And they can lead you very subtly to keep going back to people who treat you terribly, yet part of you is trying to get them to love you so that way you feel psychologically safe. And I can say this from my own experience because I've gone through it, is to say that it's very easy to talk about a lot of the stuff we're talking about today and to shine a light on it, be like, oh, I understand it at a cognitive level, but it is such a different thing to feel it in the body and to see it playing out in real time and to stop yourself and go, I need to address this.
Yeah. So Stockholm syndrome is the clinical term for a trauma bond. So that's what that is. So if you hear people talk about trauma bonds or Stockholm syndrome, that's a clinical term we use to reference it. And I also, talking about with great safety and the ambiguity, even if we're not the one, people in the closet and who are right, that maybe that severe avoidant attachment, who are having these ambiguous situationships, can gravitate towards people that they know are straight. They know damn well there is no no hint of same-sex attraction of any kind, and they'll do that because it feels safe for them. Because I don't know if we talked about, I think, us, we, kind of being on the receiving end as two gay people here, but I've also recognized that people who are in the closet will try and do this with straight people
Yeah.
also. because again, doing it with somebody who they know is part of the LGBTQ community is too threatening. I've seen that too. I mean, maybe for another day, but I definitely people watched. I was at a gay bar in Toronto, and a guy in like assless chaps trying to be someone from the village people, like, I'm not gay, and just it was this whole navigating the bar, and I just sat there and watched, and I'm like, okay, okay, and you're going to all the straight men. Like there was a bachelorette party, and some of the boyfriends and the husbands went. Like it was that was a party, and there was this guy going over and trying to hang out with the men because he knew that they were very straight and he was not. And it was this it was this again guy in the closet trying to be this weird ambiguous situationship. It was, I know, I recognize I'm not explaining it well, but it was kind of comical to watch but heartbreaking at the same time. And I've seen that, and I've seen it in other dynamics too. But yeah, I'll never forget the guy in assless chaps who did that. He was proclaiming how straight he was, and he just wanted to go out for a good time on a Saturday night. Okay. So
If you
it
say
was a
so.
whole thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
seen that play out in real life too with some people where I just sort of raise my eyebrow and go, okay, that's how it
Yep.
be. All I'm just saying is, the closet's made of glass today. Like, and you're screaming in that closet. But anyways,
Yeah.
I think if anything, this really just goes to show how sophisticated these protective mechanisms can be. Both the side of it, which is all about denial, about denying one's truth, and then the other parts of it that get us pulled into these experiences in the first place too, because man, they can rob us of such healthy experiences in love and relationships. But yeah, it's pretty intense. In any case,
Yeah.
thank you, Megan, for joining me to have this conversation today. As we're running out, is there anything
Thank
you want
you.
to say to anyone who's so to people who've been listening?
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Ken. I always enjoy getting to do these lives and letter readings with you. So for folks interested, I do have space for clients, limited space, but I do have some. I also have space for clarity calls. And as I said at the beginning of this live, I do work part-time with Ken. So I work Mondays and Tuesdays for folks that are curious or interested. Yeah, so you can reach out. You can find my email on the booking page. You can, again, book in for clarity calls and coaching. Yeah, I'm in Eastern Standard Time, so I see clients all over the world. If you can make the time work, I'll be more than happy to see you. So again, thank you so much for having me on today, Ken. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree. And this was a conversation that I've been wanting to talk about for a while because it's not always a common experience that happens in the cases that we often talk about, but it is still a variation that comes out. And is often there is a lot of shame attached to it. And I was like, no, I definitely want to talk about this because I know what it's like to go through this. I've probably had more situationships and ambiguationships than I have fingers on my hand. And I've learned so much about myself as a consequence of that entire thing. And it's just one of those things where I think, you people listening to this who go through this need to learn the realities of it. It's like it's trauma,
Yeah,
100%.
it really is. It really is. Yeah.
So I will be back again, probably for a letter reading or another topic we were looking at too, which is describing mental health professionals who go through these cases as well too, meaning they're on the receiving end of these avoidant breakups and what it means for us in the field. But yeah, until then, we will see you guys next time.